When we were writing intervals, right, we saw some intervals where it was like a less than b less, or a less than x less than b, right? That is a linear inequality technically, but sometimes it's not just x, so you may have something else in there, okay? So how do you report that as your answer? Let's see. Okay, so it says solve reporting your answer in interval notation. Okay, so from here, we're given 4 minus x less than 3x, 3 times the quantity x minus 8. Okay, for a moment, I want you to think, how would you work this if you had an equal sign in there? Well, you would maybe begin by distributing the 3. Okay, so let's do that. Let's say that we have x minus 4 less, or is greater than 3x minus 24. Okay, that's fine. And then if we had equals in there, again, and just imagine that we had an equal sign in there, what would I do next? Well, I would get all the x's on one side, all the non-x's on the other. So I'll just preserve that. And so, okay, if I got all the x's on one side, I would subtract x from both sides. And so then all the x's would be on the right, all the non-x's, so move the 24 over, okay? And so then I would get, 20 is bigger than 2x. And then next, again, if this was equals, I would divide by 2, okay? And then coming out over here, so I'd get 10 is bigger than x. Or rearranging, flip-flopping sides, x would be less than 10, okay? So that everything I did here is completely valid, okay? There is, when we're working with interval or solving inequalities like this, linear inequalities, there is one rule that we need to pay attention to, and we have not come across it. So we'll just work with this. So let's finish off this example. So write this in interval notation. So again, if the picture helps, feel free to draw a picture, and I'd have 10, bracket, and then it would open to the left because 10 is less than x, right? So I'd have minus infinity, comma 10, parentheses on both, and I would be done. Okay? So just to summarize, in this example, we added, right, to both sides, and we subtracted from both sides. That's completely fine. We divided by a positive number to both sides in the inequality. That is also fine. What is not fine, and where we need to really pay attention, is if we multiply or divide by a negative number. That reverses the inequality. Okay? So that's the only thing that we really need to pay attention to. All right? So one example that's maybe a little bit more complex is what we call a compound inequality. We have that sandwich case where it's like a is less than x is less than b. Okay? Except it's not just x. And how do we work with this? The short answer is that we work with it just like we would any other equation, but again, there are 3 parts, so what I do to one part, I have to do to all 3 parts. Okay, so if I add something to one part, I have to add it to all 3. Okay, there is a different way of doing this, but it's like twice the work. So we're going to just work with it this way. All right, so let's see, what should I do first? Honestly, it's a matter of opinion. I notice that there's a 3 here, and a 6. All of those are divisible by 3, so let's actually just divide each factor, each part of the inequality by 3, and I would get 1 less than or equal to 2 minus 5x is less than 2. Okay. And again, my goal is to isolate x, so how do I do that? I have to undo the 2, so subtract 2 from all 3 components. And I'd have minus 1 less than or equal to 2 minus 5, no longer 2, minus 5x less than 0. And the last step here would be to divide by negative 5. Okay, to isolate x. So then I'm going to come up here with that, and I have negative. So negative 1 divided by negative 5 would be 1/5 is less than x is less than 0. Okay, yes, I messed up, but I want to show you something. Okay. Does this even make sense? Okay. So on a number line, I have 0, I have 1/5. Okay. This is saying that x is less than 0, but simultaneously, right, it has to be bigger than 1/5. That can't happen, right? So that's, if you visualize the interval, it has to make sense because right at the beginning, x was sandwiched between these things. At the end, it has to be sandwiched as well. It can't spontaneously go to something else, okay? So if you draw a picture, that'll allow you to say, okay, this isn't right. Oh, I divided by a negative, right? So I need to make sure to switch my inequalities when I do that, okay? And now I would get that it's sandwiched between, okay? So, or if we write it differently, 0 is less than x is less than 1/5, okay? So then my final answer here would be 0, comma, 1/5, both with brackets on them. I'm sorry, I lost inequality there. Okay, so a bracket on the 1/5, but a parentheses on the 0. Okay, so key thing, if you remember, if you multiply or divide by a negative, that reverses the inequality. Okay, so keep that in mind as you're solving linear inequalities.